mamu ina akwa ba e de ben kasa TV na say na no first ma hwe e kasa TV a message say be like no subscribe no ahye say there every time you no correct news update ahwe no hu dia e koso e wo man Ghana na etefo e ononyamfo Godfred Yebo Adame ono no the Minister for Defense on the Joy News every and komo kakra concerning etefo 3-4 main things etefo e koso e wo Ghana memu ha na for some we major activities e be koso from the year 2025 echo. Now, first of all, Kasafa, a dubious scandal set for echo during a former President John Dramani Mahama Abanso. Now, it's a version in Kasa. That's what we say the amount of money it's for or Jiffy, the previous government are buying one money for. Let's can I know adding part to the point say, and Kasa one share, not say and share, Kasa winner echo amount for bottom, including the sale of air Tamaport to the French investor and other numerous scandals there. Urban scandals set for echo a whole host of others. Also Kasafa infrastructure and I said this current government MPP Amanukuna Bino and Nama Mayana said different kind of infrastructure and I said we Adanya Messi a Diabua or my Ghana no Kasafa and also Sahu. Another 13 Kasafa the 2.3 million euros ambulance scandals. Now Ghana for we now modern say the 2.3 million euros ambulance scandal at Twitter. Mr. Musasu cases to be said for the $2.3 million ambulance scandals. No, it's for entrach. They say, in a backaya, I have Godfred Yebo Adame at an appeal at the Supreme Court in him. The interpretation concerning and some I had the appeals court. I can't. Now it's when it's a summer echo, so I need to Pino. I could have put the exclusive interviewer. It's for Godfred Yebo Adame and it join you. Madam Wina has some share a year in Kasa TV.
A specific person. So there's no interest necessarily that a particular person in Ghana will have personally in a constitutional question. The question is for the court to determine the constitutionality of an action, a decision, or of a law. If Parliament passes a law and that is being questioned, it is not the interest of the members of Parliament at stake. Members of Parliament don't have a specific or direct or personal interest in a law at all. So the point has been made way back in 1980 with the famous case of Tufo Atenjera and other matters, and that was 44 years ago, that in a constitutional case, the community of interest or the community of interest of the parties is with the Constitution, not personally. So when the Atenjera is sued in a constitutional matter, it is not because the Atenjera has done X, Y, Z that the Atenjera has been taken to court. It is not because the president's personal matter is being dealt with by the Supreme Court at all. Because indeed, as I said, the Constitution is supposed to govern everybody, supposed to be the principle, the basic law of the country. And that is why the Constitution itself recognizes the seriousness of the instrument that it sets out for the people, and then determines a specific institution to interpret that Constitution. And the interpretation of that Constitution is binding on all. Again, it's also because a person has no direct or personal interest in a constitutional question. That is why the Constitution makes the Atenjera the defendant in all government actions. We all work on behalf of the government, but the government is not our personal property. The state is not our personal property. If I take a decision as a public officer, I take so by dint of the law that is imposed on me, and I walk away from this office, the next Atenjera will be saddled with responsibility for the action that we take. It tells you that we have no personal direct interest in it. So for that reason, I think philosophically, even Parliament is not supposed to be a party in constitutional actions.
So you think it's wrong for Parliament to have been joined?
In my view, it's wrong. And I raised that point. The Supreme Court did not rule on it. But again, some other lawyer would have gone outside court and been making noise, writing articles in the media or the internet that the Supreme Court refused to rule on the questions. It's nothing at all. There's nothing personal. I raise my questions. If the court decides to rule, so be it. The courts do not rule unless it's very important to the exercise in question. I will not even pursue it. So the number of points I raised that day in court, that was one of them. That I do not think Parliament is even a proper party the court did not rule. I also raised the issue that, for me, the counsel for the Speaker of Parliament cannot even be holding proceedings, holding up proceedings or holding everybody to ransom on account of failure to file processes, because indeed he is not even mandated, lawfully mandated by the laws of Ghana to represent the Speaker, because under the laws of Ghana, a public officer, when he is acting and seeks the services of any other person or institution, seeks the services of a person, will have to act so in accordance with the provisions of the Public Procurement Act, and that has not been done. The court did not rule again on that issue. I left it at that. I also raised the issue that even the Speaker's motion fundamentally was flawed, because it ought not to have been brought at all, because when the Supreme Court makes a decision and there's supposed to be a challenge to that decision, it must be in accordance with Article 183 of the Constitution. Article 183 of the Constitution requires that any decision or action, any decision, simple, any decision of the Supreme Court is subject to review. And the review must be conducted in accordance with Article 183, which is, it must be by a court of a minimum 7. The Speaker filed a motion not for a review, but to set aside the decision of the Supreme Court. That is even flawed fundamentally. It is unknown to the Constitution. The court did not rule on it. The court decided to look at it in merit and then dismiss it. That is fine. I don't have an issue with it. So I again will reiterate that, yes, if I make any argument in the Supreme Court, just to answer your question again, if I make any argument in the Supreme Court siding with a case or opposing it, it is not because of a personal interest I have, but it is on account of a faithful view I take of the provisions of the Constitution. And it's quite clear, the Constitution is supreme, the sovereignty of the people is upheld by the Constitution, we are all subject to the Constitution. Parliament of Ghana can never be supreme, and indeed that supremacy of Parliament is definitely offensive to the Constitution and cannot be retained in the interest of a preservation of the constitutional order of the country.
The Speaker has had a press conference just today, and he's raised a number of issues. One of them is that he claims that the President and the Supreme Court have sinned against the Constitution. What's your take on that?
I think the first and foremost, we must recognize the irregularity or perhaps unusualness of the decision of the Speaker to make a press conference. In my short life, I've not seen a Speaker of Parliament address the nation on a decision of the court. That is because the Parliament itself recognizes the compartmentalization of rules set up by the Constitution. The Constitution has compartmentalized functions. The executive has its own functions to maintain law and order and to ensure that the needs of the people are satisfied in law. So indeed, it cannot be questioned how the executive decides to prioritize one project over another, unless it is in violation of the law. So certain things, perhaps, I think we must agree on it. Certain things have to be agreed, otherwise there cannot be a preservation of this democratic order of the nation. And that's my prime concern, that the road on which we're traveling, if care is not taken, there will be disintegration of the democracy that we have chosen for ourselves. And there will be recourse to self-help, which ought not to be the case at all. I, with all respect, saw the Speaker as trying a little bit too much. He's my very good friend, and for that matter, I mean, I'll just say so. Trying too much because, as I said, I did not see how conventional it is for a Speaker to address the nation after a Supreme Court ruling and express his views on it. There's freedom of speech, no doubt. Every person has the right to express his freedom of speech on a decision of the court. President Joe Biden recently expressed his view on the Supreme Court judgment over long Supreme Court decision, Roe and Wade, overturning the position of the court on abortion and what have you. of course, we also know what's happening to the Democratic Party now. Perhaps even the defeat was occasioned by such positions and all that it took after the Supreme Court had expressed a rejection of the position of the court taken in Roe and Wade.